Roman Audibrook, Snowfall and Sparks. Chapter 1. Cold Arrivals. Clara Bennett's breath fogged the windshield as she maneuvered her rental car down the snow-dusted roads of Pine Hollow, Vermont. The pines loomed like silent sentinels, their branches heavy with fresh powder, while the sky churned with gray clouds promising more. The sign for the Maple Hearth Inn flickered into view, its faded letters barely legible under a crust of ice. Clara's stomach twisted, a knot of dread and nostalgia she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't ready for this, coming back to the town she'd sworn to leave behind forever. At 30, Clara had built a life in Boston, planning corporate events with crisp efficiency. But Pine Hollow wasn't Boston. It was the place where she'd learned to love, to dream, and to hurt. 12 years ago, she'd fled with a broken heart, her suitcase stuffed with clothes and her pride in tatters. Now she was back, not for sentiment, but for survival. The inn, her family's legacy, was drowning in debt. Her parents were gone, her mom to cancer, her dad to a heart attack, and the bank was circling. If she didn't turn things around by spring, the Maple Hearth would be auctioned off, and with it, the last piece of her past she could still touch. She parked in the gravel lot, the crunch of snow under her boots sharp in the stillness. The inn looked smaller than she remembered, its white clapboard siding peeling, the wraparound porch sagging under icicles that glinted like daggers. But the glow from the mullioned windows promised warmth, and the faint scent of wood smoke curled through the air, tugging at memories she'd buried deep. Her mom baking gingerbread, her dad stoking the fireplace, her own laughter echoing through the halls. Clara shook her head, shoving the memories down. She wasn't here to reminisce. She was here to fix the inn, maybe sell it, and get back to her life. Her breath puffed in clouds as she hauled her suitcase from the trunk, the cold biting through her wool coat. The front door creaked open before she reached the steps, and out bustled Mrs. Delaney, Pine Hollow's self-appointed mayor and professional meddler. Her silver hair was piled into a bun, and her scarf, a neon red that rivaled the Christmas lights on Main Street, fluttered in the wind. Clara Bennett, as I live and breathe. Mrs. Delaney's voice was a mix of syrup and steel. She pulled Clara into a hug that smelled of lavender and cinnamon, squeezing like she was trying to wring out the last 12 years. You're skinnier than a snowflake. Don't they feed you in that big city? Clara extricated herself, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. I eat plenty, Mrs. D. Just here to get the inn back on track. Back on track? Mrs. Delaney's eyebrows shot up, her mittened hands planting on her hips. Oh, honey, it's more than a tune-up. The pipes groan, the roof leaks, and don't get me started on the wiring. But you're just in time for the Winter Glow Festival. A good event could put this old place back on the map. Clara's smile tightened. The Winter Glow Festival, Pine Hollow's annual excuse to string lights, sell maple fudge, and pretend the world was a Hallmark movie. She'd loved it as a kid, but now it sounded like one more complication. I'm not here for festivals, she said, hefting her suitcase. I just need to make the inn sellable. Mrs. Delaney's eyes twinkled with that dangerous enthusiasm Clara remembered too well. Sellable? Nonsense. You'll fall in love with it again, mark my words. We've got a carpenter coming tomorrow to start repairs. Fine young man. You'll like him. Clara bit back a retort. She wasn't here to like anyone. She needed a shower, a bed, and a plan, not Mrs. Delaney's matchmaking. Great, she said, her tone clipped. I'll meet him tomorrow. Right now, I'm freezing. Go on, then. Mrs. Delaney patted her arm, undeterred. You'll find a fire in the lobby and a little Christmas magic, too. Clara rolled her eyes but trudged up the steps, the porch boards creaking underfoot. The lobby was a time capsule, plaid armchairs worn soft, a stone fireplace crackling with fresh logs, a guest book on the counter where her mom used to scribble guest names with a flourish. The air smelled of pine and old books, and for a moment Clara was 16 again, sneaking cookies from the kitchen while her dad told stories to guests. She was halfway to the stairs, her boots leaving wet prints on the hardwood, when a voice stopped her cold, a voice she hadn't heard in 12 years, but one that still lived in her dreams. Clara? Her heart slammed against her ribs, her suitcase thudding to the floor. Slowly, she turned. Noah Ellis stood in the doorway to the dining room, a hammer in one hand, a toolbox at his feet. He was taller than she remembered, his shoulders broader under a flannel shirt, his brown hair dusted with sawdust. But those hazel eyes were the same, warm, searching, and sharp enough to cut through her defenses. "Noah," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her throat tightened, a flood of memories crashing in. Stolen kisses under the town gazebo, promises whispered in the dark, the note he'd left on her pillow when he ended it without a word. "I'm sorry. I can't stay." He set the hammer down, wiping his hands on his jeans, his gaze never leaving her. "What are you doing here?" The question stung like she was the one who'd vanished. "I could ask you the same thing," she shot back, crossing her arms. "I'm here to save the inn. You?" "Mrs. Delaney hired me to fix it up." His voice was steady, but there was a flicker in his eyes. Regret, maybe, or surprise. "Didn't know you'd be back." The air crackled with everything unsaid. 12 years ago, they'd been inseparable, planning a life together, until he'd walked away, leaving her to pick up the pieces. She'd spent years hating him, then years trying to forget. Now here he was, looking at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "I'm here to work," she said, lifting her chin, "not to relive the past." His jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Fair enough. I'm just the hired help. We'll stay out of each other's way." "Good." She grabbed her suitcase, her boots squeaking as she headed for the stairs. But halfway up, she couldn't resist a glance back. Noah was still watching her, his expression unreadable, and for a split second, she saw the boy who'd carved their initials into a pine tree and promised her forever. Her chest ached, but she shoved it down, climbing faster. Pine Hollow was already testing her, and Noah Ellis was a storm she hadn't seen coming. As she reached her old room and saw the snow falling outside, soft and relentless, she knew this winter was going to break her, or remake her, and she wasn't sure which scared her more. Chapter 2. Frosty Beginnings. Clara Bennett woke to the sound of snowplows scraping the streets of Pine Hollow, a grating reminder that she wasn't in Boston anymore. Her old bedroom at the Maple Hearth Inn smelled of cedar and memory, the quilt on her bed, the same one her mom had stitched when she was a kid. Sunlight filtered through frost-laced windows, painting the floorboards gold, but Clara's mood was anything but warm. Noah Ellis was here, in her inn, in her life, and the thought made her want to pull the quilt over her head and stay there until spring. She dragged herself out of bed, the chill of the floorboards seeping through her socks. Downstairs, the lobby was quiet, the fireplace reduced to glowing embers. A pot of coffee sat on the counter, its bitter aroma a lifeline. She poured a mug, savoring the heat against her palms, and tried to focus on her plan. Meet the carpenter, assess the inn's damage, and sketch out a budget. Simple. Except the carpenter was Noah, and nothing about him had ever been simple. The front door swung open, letting in a blast of cold air, and Mrs. Delaney, her scarf now a blinding shade of green. She carried a basket of muffins, her smile as relentless as the snow outside. "Morning, Clara. I brought blueberry muffins. Your mom's recipe. God rest her soul. You ready to meet that carpenter?" Clara's grip on her mug tightened. "Already did," she said, her tone flat. "Noah Ellis. You didn't mention that part." Mrs. Delaney's eyes twinkled, entirely too pleased with herself. "Did I forget? Silly me. Noah's the best in town, you know. Strong hands, good heart. You two used to be thick as thieves." "That was a long time ago," Clara snapped, then softened, not wanting to fuel the town's gossip mill. "We'll manage. I just need him to fix the inn, not anything else." Mrs. Delaney patted her hand, undeterred. "Oh, honey, you can't plan everything like one of your city events. Sometimes life's got its own ideas." Before Clara could argue, a thud echoed from the dining room, followed by the low hum of a power drill. Her stomach flipped. Noah. She drained her coffee, squared her shoulders, and marched toward the noise, determined to keep this professional. The dining room was a mess of sawdust and drop cloths, the long oak table pushed against the wall. Noah knelt by a baseboard, his flannel shirt stretched across his shoulders as he pried loose a rotted piece of wood. He didn't look up, but the set of his jaw told her he knew she was there. "Morning," she said, aiming for neutral but landing closer to Kurt. "What's the damage?" He glanced at her, his hazel eyes catching the light from a nearby window. "Morning to you, too. Damage is about what you'd expect for a place this old. Rot in the baseboards, leaks in the roof, some wiring that's more tape than copper. I'll need a week just to stabilize things." Clara crossed her arms, the weight of his estimate sinking in. "A week? I don't have that kind of time. Or money. The bank's breathing down my neck. And this Winter Glow Festival is my only shot to bring in guests." He stood, brushing sawdust from his jeans, and she hated how her pulse kicked up at the motion. "Then we'll prioritize," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Roof first, then the lobby. Festival's in 2 weeks, right? We can make it work if you stop glaring at me like I'm the one who broke the pipes." Her cheeks flushed, but she held his gaze. "I'm not glaring. I'm strategizing, and I wouldn't have to if you'd—" She stopped, biting back the words. "If you'd stayed. If you'd explained." Noah's expression flickered like he'd heard the unspoken. "If I'd what?" he asked, quieter now, stepping closer. The air between them thickened, charged with 12 years of questions neither had answered. Before she could respond, Mrs. Delaney bustled in, her basket swinging. "Oh, good, you're both here. Clara, I told the festival committee you'd handle the inn's booth. Maple hot chocolate. Maybe some of your mom's gingerbread. Noah, you're helping with the stage setup, yes?" Clara's jaw dropped. "Mrs. D, I didn't agree to a booth. I've got enough." "Nonsense." Mrs. Delaney waved her off. "It's for the inn. You and Noah will be a dream team just like old times." Noah coughed, possibly to hide a laugh, and Clara shot him a look that could have melted snow. "Fine," she said through gritted teeth, "but only because it's for the inn." Mrs. Delaney beamed, oblivious to the tension. "Wonderful. I'll leave you two to it. Muffins are on the counter." She swept out, leaving a trail of lavender scent and chaos. Clara turned back to Noah, who was watching her with a mix of amusement and something deeper she didn't want to name. "Don't say it," she warned, pointing a finger. "Say what?" He raised his hands, the corner of his mouth twitching. "That you're still terrible at saying no to Mrs. Delaney? Or that we're stuck together, whether you like it or not?" "Both," she muttered, but a reluctant smile tugged at her lips. She squashed it fast. Let's just focus on the inn. What do you need from me?" "Access to the attic for the roof inspection," he said, grabbing his toolbox, "and maybe a truce. I'm not the enemy, Clara." She wanted to argue, to tell him he'd been the enemy since the day he left her with nothing but a note. But the sincerity in his eyes stopped her, stirring something she'd locked away long ago. "Fine," she said, her voice softer than she meant. "Truce. For now." He nodded, but as he headed for the stairs, his shoulder brushed hers, sending a jolt through her that had nothing to do with the cold. She watched him go, her heart pounding, and realized a truce with Noah Ellis might be the most dangerous thing she'd ever agreed to. Chapter 3. Echoes in the Snow. Clara Bennett's breath puffed in the chilly air as she climbed the narrow staircase to the attic of the Maple Hearth Inn, her flashlight beam bouncing off the worn steps. The scent of old wood and frost clung to the walls, and each creak under her boots felt like a warning. Noah Ellis led the way, his toolbox clinking softly, his broad frame filling the tight space. Clara tried to focus on the task, checking the roof for leaks, but her mind kept snagging on him. On the way, his voice had softened yesterday when he'd offered a truce. On the way, her heart had betrayed her with a flutter when his shoulder brushed hers. "Mind the top step," Noah said, glancing back, his hazel eyes catching the dim light. "It's wobbly." "Noted," Clara replied, her tone sharper than she meant. She gripped the flashlight tighter as if it could anchor her against the pull of him. This was supposed to be simple. Save the inn. Avoid the past. But Noah was the past, and now he was here, all flannel and quiet strength, making her question everything she'd buried. The attic door groaned as Noah pushed it open, releasing a cloud of dust that danced in their flashlight beams. The space was a frozen time capsule, trunks stacked like forgotten secrets, a broken rocking chair, cobwebs draping the rafters like lace. A single window crusted with ice let in a weak glow, illuminating the slanted roof where Noah suspected water was seeping through. "Looks like my mom hoarded half of Vermont up here," Clara said, sweeping her light across the clutter. Her voice was light, but the mention of her mom tightened her throat. She hadn't been back since the funeral, and every corner of the inn felt like a ghost. Noah chuckled, the sound low and warm, cutting through the chill. She never could throw anything out. Said it all had a story. He knelt by a rafter, tapping it with his hammer, the sound sharp in the quiet. Clara swallowed, stepping over a pile of old quilts. "Let's just find the leak and get out. This place gives me the creeps." They worked in uneasy silence, Noah checking beams, Clara holding the flashlight and pretending she wasn't hyper-aware of his every move. The way his fingers traced the wood, steady and sure, reminded her of how he'd fixed her bike when they were 16. His hands gentle but strong, back when she'd thought he'd hold her heart just as carefully. "Here," Noah said, pointing to a dark stain on a rafter. "Water's getting through the shingles. I can patch it for now, but the roof needs replacing soon." Clara's stomach sank, the cost piling onto her already impossible budget. Of course it does, because nothing in this inn can just work. He looked at her, his expression softer than she expected. "We'll make it work, Clara, one thing at a time." The "we" hit her like a snowball, unexpected and disarming. She turned away, her flashlight catching a glint of metal under a beam. A small tin box, its lid etched with a maple leaf, lay half buried in dust. Her breath hitched. She'd know that box anywhere. It was hers from high school, where she'd kept her treasures. Without thinking, she knelt and pried it open, the hinges squeaking. Inside was a locket, its silver chain tangled, and a folded note. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the locket, the weight of it pulling her back 12 years. Noah had given it to her on her 17th birthday, a tiny maple leaf engraved on its face. Noah crouched beside her, close enough that she felt the warmth of him. "Is that—" His voice trailed off, and she knew he recognized it too. "Yeah," she said, her throat tight. She unfolded the note, her handwriting shaky but unmistakable. Clara and Noah, forever. The words were a knife, sharp and sudden, and she couldn't look at him. "Clara," he said, his voice low like he was afraid to break something. "I didn't know you kept that." She snapped the box shut, shoving it back under the beam. "It doesn't mean anything. Just kid stuff." But her voice cracked, betraying her. He didn't push, but the silence between them was heavy, filled with all the things they hadn't said. "We should check the roof outside," he said finally, standing. "Get a better look." She nodded, grateful for the escape, and followed him downstairs and out into the snow. Pine Hollow was a winter painting, snow-laden pines, icicles glinting like chandeliers, the faint hum of festival preparations in the town square. The cold bit through Clara's coat as they crossed the inn's back lawn, where the roof slope was visible. Noah pointed out cracked shingles, his voice steady, but Clara's mind was stuck on the locket, on the girl who had believed in forever. "You're quiet," Noah said, pausing to face her. Snowflakes caught in his hair and his eyes searched hers, gentle but piercing. "That locket, it got to you, didn't it?" She crossed her arms, the cold seeping into her bones. "It's just a reminder of how naive I was, thinking things could last." His jaw tightened like he wanted to argue but didn't. "Not everything falls apart," he said quietly. "Some things just get complicated." The words hung between them, fragile as the snowflakes. Clara's heart pounded and she took a step closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. The space between them shrank, and for one wild moment she thought he might reach for her. A shout broke the spell. "Yo, Ellis!" Tommy, the inn's teenage handyman, bounded through the snow, his knit cap askew. "Mrs. D says you're slacking. Festival stage needs you." Noah grinned, the tension easing. "Tell her I'm working, and watch it, kid, or I'll bury you in a snowbank." Tommy laughed, then lobbed a snowball at Clara, catching her off guard. "You're on, city girl!" Clara gasped, scooping snow. "Oh, you're done!" She pelted him back, and soon all three were dodging and laughing, snow flying like confetti. Noah joined in, his aim infuriatingly good, and Clara's laughter rang out, startling her with its lightness. For a moment she wasn't the woman drowning in debt or haunted by heartbreak. She was just Clara, alive in the snow, with a man whose smile still undid her. As the fight wound down, Noah caught her eye, his grin fading into something softer, more dangerous. Snow clung to his eyelashes, and the memory of the locket pulsed between them. "We should head in," she said, brushing snow from her coat, her voice unsteady. "It's freezing." He nodded, but as they walked back, his hand grazed hers, a fleeting warmth that burned through the cold. Clara's pulse raced, and she knew with a certainty that terrified her that no amount of snow could bury what was stirring between them. Chapter 4. Cracks in the Plan. Clara Bennett stood in the lobby of the Maple Hearth Inn, surrounded by a chaos of festival preparations that felt more like a snowstorm than a celebration. The Winter Glow Festival was 10 days away, and the inn was supposed to host a hot chocolate booth, but nothing was going right. A stack of flyers lay scattered on the counter, their edges curling from a spilled mug of coffee. The ancient espresso machine had coughed its last breath that morning, and Tommy, the teenage handyman, was currently wrestling with a tangle of Christmas lights that refused to untangle. Clara's head throbbed, and the scent of pine from the freshly cut wreath on the door did little to soothe her. She glanced at her notebook, its pages filled with budgets and to-do lists that grew longer by the hour. The inn's bank account was a whisper away from empty, and the festival was her only shot to draw guests and prove the maple hearth was worth saving. But every step forward felt like 2 steps back, and the weight of it all pressed against her chest like the snow piling outside. The front door swung open, letting in a gust of cold air, and Noah Ellis, his arms loaded with wooden planks for the festival stage. Snow dusted his dark hair, and his flannel shirt was rolled up, revealing forearms that Clara definitely wasn't noticing. He set the planks by the fireplace, his gaze flicking to her with a mix of concern and amusement. "Looks like a war zone in here," he said, brushing snow from his jacket. "You holding up?" "Barely," Clara admitted, rubbing her temples. "The espresso machine's dead, the flyers are a mess, and Tommy's about to declare war on those lights. I'm one bad phone call away from burning this place down myself." Noah chuckled, the sound warm enough to thaw the chill in her bones. "Don't give up yet. I've seen you handle worse." She raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "When? That time I crashed my bike into the creek? Or when I tried to bake cookies and set off the fire alarm?" "Both," he said, his grin widening. "You always come through, Clara. Always have." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard, stirring memories of the boy who'd cheered her on through every scraped knee and failed exam. She wanted to lean into it, to let his confidence bolster her, but the locket they'd found yesterday still haunted her, a reminder of how easily promises could break. Before she could respond, Tommy let out a triumphant yell, holding up a now untangled string of lights. "Victory! These are going on the booth, right?" "Right," Clara said, forcing a smile. "Just don't electrocute yourself. I can't afford a lawsuit." Tommy saluted, scampering off, and Noah stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're doing too much alone. Let me help with the booth. I can build the frame, maybe carve some maple leaf designs to match the inn's vibe." Clara hesitated. Accepting help meant letting him in, and every moment with Noah felt like a step toward a cliff she wasn't ready to jump off. But the exhaustion in her bones won out. "Fine," she said, "but don't think this makes us buddies." He raised his hands, mock serious. "Wouldn't dream of it. Just trying to keep you from torching the inn." She snorted, a reluctant smile breaking through, and for a moment the chaos felt manageable. They spent the next hour sorting flyers and sketching booth designs, Noah's steady presence grounding her. His suggestions, wooden signs, fairy lights, were good, better than she'd expected, and she found herself relaxing, their banter slipping into something almost easy. As they worked, the lobby's fireplace crackled, casting a warm glow across the room. Noah knelt to adjust a sketch, his shoulder brushing hers, and Clara's breath hitched. He smelled of sawdust and snow, and the memory of their snowball fight yesterday, his laugh echoing in the cold, made her heart stutter. "You're staring," he said, not looking up, but a teasing edge crept into his voice. "I'm not," she lied, her cheeks flushing. "I'm checking your math. That frame's too big." He glanced at her, his eyes dancing. "My math's fine. Your focus, though." He let the sentence hang, and the air between them thickened, charged with something she couldn't ignore. Clara's pulse raced, and she leaned closer, drawn by the warmth in his gaze. For one reckless moment she imagined closing the distance, feeling his breath against her lips. His hand twitched like he was thinking the same, and the world narrowed to just them, the firelight, the snow outside. Her phone buzzed on the counter, shattering the moment. She jerked back, grabbing it with a curse. The screen showed First Valley Bank, and her stomach plummeted. She answered, her voice tight. Clara Bennett. "Ms. Bennett," a crisp voice said, "this is Mr. Hargrove. We've reviewed your account, and without a significant payment by month's end, we'll need to proceed with foreclosure proceedings." Clara's grip tightened, her knuckles white. "I'm working on it. The festival—" "We'll need to be extraordinary," he cut in. "We'll be in touch." The line went dead. She set the phone down, her hands trembling. Noah stood, his expression shifting from playful to concerned. "Clara, what's wrong?" "It's the bank," she said, her voice hollow. "They're ready to pull the plug. If this festival flops, I lose everything." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the snowflakes melting in his hair. "It won't flop. You're not doing this alone, okay? I'm here." His words were a lifeline, but they also terrified her. She'd trusted him once, and he'd left. What was stopping him now? "Why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why are you helping me?" Noah's gaze held hers, steady and unguarded. "Because this place matters, and so do you." Her breath caught, and the room felt too small, too warm. She wanted to believe him, to let his words fill the cracks in her heart, but fear held her back. Before she could respond, Tommy burst in, waving a broken light strand. Boss, we got a problem." Clara forced a laugh, stepping back. "Of course we do. Let's go, Noah." But as they followed Tommy outside, Noah's words echoed in her mind, and the almost moment by the fire lingered like a spark she couldn't extinguish. She was falling, and she wasn't sure she could stop. Chapter 5. Shattered Ice. Clara Bennett stood in the snowy yard of the Maple Hearth Inn, her breath fogging in the twilight as she watched volunteers bustle around the Winter Glow Festival setup. Strings of fairy lights twinkled across the lawn, and the scent of maple syrup wafted from a nearby kettle where Mrs. Delaney was perfecting her hot chocolate recipe. The festival was a week away, and the inn's booth, a wooden frame carved with maple leaves thanks to Noah, was nearly ready. But Clara's heart wasn't in the festive cheer. The bank's threat loomed like a storm cloud, and Noah Ellis, with his steady gaze and infuriating warmth, was a bigger problem than she'd bargained for. Yesterday's almost moment by the fireplace still burned in her mind. His words, "You matter," echoing through her like a melody she couldn't shake. She'd spent 12 years building walls around her heart, but Noah was chipping away at them, and the locket they'd found in the attic was a crack she couldn't ignore. Why had he left her all those years ago, and why did it still hurt so much? "Clara!" Tommy's voice snapped her back, the teenage handyman waving from the booth. "We're out of nails for the sign. Noah's grabbing more, but Mrs. D's freaking out about the cocoa ratio again." Clara forced a smile, tucking her scarf tighter against the cold. "Tell her to stick to the recipe. I'll check on the sign." As Tommy darted off, Clara trudged toward the booth, her boots sinking into fresh snow. The inn glowed behind her, its windows warm against the darkening sky, but the weight of her to-do list pressed harder than ever. She was halfway to the booth when Noah appeared, a bag of nails in one hand, his other brushing snow from his hair. His grin was easy, like they hadn't almost crossed a line yesterday, and it both annoyed and disarmed her. "Save the day," he said, tossing her the bag. "You owe me a coffee." She caught it, rolling her eyes. You're getting paid to be here, Ellis. Coffee's not in the contract. His laugh was low, warm, and it stirred something dangerous in her chest. Fair. But I'm holding you to that hot chocolate booth. It's gonna be the talk of the festival. Clara snorted, but her smile slipped as she noticed a folded piece of paper sticking out of his toolbox, half buried under a hammer. It looked old, its edges worn, and something about it tugged at her memory. "What's that?" she asked, pointing. Noah's expression shifted, a flicker of unease crossing his face. Nothing, just notes for the stage. But his hesitation was enough to spark her curiosity. Before she could stop herself, she reached for it, brushing past his attempt to grab it first. The paper was brittle, the ink faded, but the words hit her like a slap. "Clara, I'm sorry, I have to go. Don't hate me. Noah." Her blood ran cold. It was the note, the one he'd left on her pillow 12 years ago, the one that had shattered her. "You kept this?" she asked, her voice trembling. Noah's jaw tightened, and he looked away, snowflakes catching in his eyelashes. "Clara, Why?" she cut in, stepping closer, the note crumpling in her fist. "Why did you leave? You didn't even have the guts to say it to my face. And now you're here, acting like we can just, what? Pick up where we left off?" He flinched, but his voice was steady. "It wasn't that simple. My dad was sick, Clara, cancer. He didn't want anyone to know, not even you. I had to go with him to Boston for treatment. I thought I was protecting you." The words landed like a punch, stealing her breath. She remembered Noah's dad, gruff but kind, always sneaking her extra maple candies. She hadn't known he was sick. No one had. "Protecting me," she echoed, her voice breaking. "You broke me, Noah. I waited for you. I thought you'd come back." "I wanted to," he said, his voice raw. "But by the time Dad passed, you were gone. Off to college, building your life. I figured you were better off without me." Clara's eyes stung, and she hated it. Hated the tears, the ache, the way his words cracked her open. "You don't get to decide that for me," she said, shoving the note at his chest. "You should have told me." "I know," he said, catching her wrist gently, his touch warm against her cold skin. "I messed up. I'm sorry, Clara. I've been sorry every day since." The sincerity in his eyes was too much, and she pulled away, her heart a tangle of anger and longing. She wanted to scream, to forgive, to run, all at once. But before she could speak, Mrs. Delaney's voice rang out, sharp with panic. "Clara, Noah, the kettle's overflowing." Clara spun to see a crowd gathering around the hot chocolate station, steam billowing as Tommy tried to wrestle the kettle off the burner. "Perfect," she muttered, shoving the note into her pocket and storming over. Noah followed, his presence a shadow she couldn't shake. They worked together to salvage the mess, Noah calming the volunteers while Clara adjusted the burner, her hands shaking. The festival was slipping through her fingers, just like the inn, just like whatever was between her and Noah. As the crowd dispersed, she caught his eye, and the pain in his gaze mirrored her own. "We need to talk," she said, her voice low, "but not now. Not here." He nodded, but as he turned to help Tommy, Clara felt the note burning in her pocket, a reminder that some wounds didn't heal. They just waited for the right moment to bleed again. And with the festival looming, she wasn't sure she could survive another break. Chapter 6. Flickering Lights. Clara Bennett stood behind the hot chocolate booth at the Winter Glow Festival, the air thick with the scent of maple syrup and the hum of Pine Hollow's celebration. Fairy lights twinkled across the inn's lawn, casting a golden glow over snow-dusted tables and chattering locales. Children darted through the crowd, their mittens clutching candy canes, while a folk band strummed carols on the stage Noah had built. The festival was a success. Guests filled the inn's lobby, bookings were up, and Mrs. Delaney was already calling it the best glow yet. But Clara's heart was a tangled knot, caught between the triumph of the night and the ache of Noah Ellis's confession 2 days ago. His words still echoed. "I thought I was protecting you." He'd left because of his father's cancer, a secret he'd carried alone, thinking it would spare her pain. She'd wanted to hate him for it, but the raw regret in his eyes had cracked something in her, and now she didn't know what to feel. Forgiveness, anger, or something more dangerous like the pull she'd felt when he touched her wrist, his warmth cutting through her cold. "Clara, you're daydreaming again." Mrs. Delaney's voice jolted her, the older woman bustling up with a tray of gingerbread cookies. Her green scarf fluttered, and her smile was relentless. "Pour some hot chocolate before these folks riot, and smile. You saved the inn." Clara forced a grin, ladling steaming cocoa into mugs. "It's not saved yet, Mrs. D. The bank's still watching." But the crowd's laughter and the clink of coins in the donation jar gave her hope. Maybe, just maybe, she'd pulled it off. Noah appeared at the booth, his flannel jacket dusted with snow, carrying a fresh stack of cups. His grin was easy, but there was a weight in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Running low?" he asked, setting the cups down. "Always," Clara said, her tone lighter than she felt. Their fingers brushed as she took a cup, and a spark shot through her, sharp and unwelcome. She pulled back, focusing on the cocoa. "Thanks for the stage. It's a hit." He leaned against the booth, his breath fogging in the cold. "Told you we'd make it work. You did good, Clara." The compliment warmed her more than it should have, and she hated how easily he slipped past her defenses. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it, but Noah's own phone chimed a moment later, and he frowned, pulling it out. His expression shifted, surprise, then something like dread. "Everything okay?" she asked, her stomach twisting. He hesitated, shoving the phone back in his pocket. "Yeah, just work stuff." But his voice was tight, and he wouldn't meet her eyes. Clara's instincts prickled. "Work stuff? Like what?" He rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture she remembered from their teenage years when he was hiding something. "It's nothing. Let's focus on the festival." But the unease in his tone was a crack in the night's magic, and Clara couldn't let it go. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Noah, don't do that. Don't shut me out again. What's going on?" He sighed, his gaze finally meeting hers, and the vulnerability there stole her breath. "I got an offer, a big one. Construction firm in Boston. They want me to lead a project. 6 months, maybe more." Clara froze, the world tilting. Boston? Hundreds of miles away. The word was a knife cutting through the fragile hope she'd let herself feel. "When?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the carols. "They need an answer by Monday," he said. "It's a lot of money, Clara. A chance to start over." Start over, without her, just like before. Her chest tightened and she turned away, pouring cocoa with hands that trembled. "Congratulations," she said, her tone flat. "Sounds like you've got it all figured out." "Clara," he said, stepping closer, his voice low and urgent, "it's not like that. I haven't decided. Clara!" Tommy's shout cut through, the teenager sprinting toward them, his cap nearly falling off. "The stage lights are flickering. I think it's the wiring." Clara cursed under her breath, the festival's chaos yanking her back. "I'll handle it," she said, brushing past Noah, her shoulder grazing his. The contact sent a jolt through her, but she kept moving, her heart a mess of anger and fear. She and Noah worked side by side to fix the lights, their movements practiced but strained. Tommy hovered, cracking nervous jokes, while Mrs. Delaney rallied the crowd with extra cookies. The lights stabilized, and the band struck up again, but Clara felt like she was unraveling. Noah's offer hung between them, a shadow over the festival's glow, and the memory of his note, "Don't hate me," burned in her pocket. As the crowd cheered, Noah caught her arm, pulling her aside near a snow-covered pine. The fairy lights cast flecks of gold across his face, and his eyes were desperate. "I don't want to hurt you again," he said, his voice rough. "But I need to know what you want, Clara. Because if you tell me to stay—" Her heart pounded, torn between the girl who'd loved him and the woman who'd learned to survive alone. She opened her mouth, but the words wouldn't come. The crowd's laughter faded, and all she could hear was her own pulse screaming that she was falling too fast, too deep. Before she could answer, a child's squeal broke the moment, and Tommy called for Noah's help with another booth. He let go of her arm, his expression a mix of hope and frustration. "We're not done talking," he said, then turned away, disappearing into the crowd. Clara stood alone, snowflakes catching in her hair, and clutched the note in her pocket. The festival sparkled around her, but all she could feel was the cold creeping in, and the terrifying truth that she might not be ready to let him go or to hold him close. Chapter 7. Sparks in the Snow. Clara Bennett stood on the porch of the Maple Hearth Inn, her breath fogging in the crisp morning air as Pine Hollow sparkled under a fresh blanket of snow. The Winter Glow Festival had ended 2 nights ago, leaving behind a trail of empty cocoa mugs, glowing reviews, and enough bookings to keep the inn afloat through spring. The bank had called yesterday, grudgingly extending her loan after the festival's success, and for the first time in weeks, Clara felt like she could breathe. But her heart was still a battlefield, torn between the victory of saving her family's legacy and the unresolved ache of Noah Ellis. His words from the festival, "If you tell me to stay," had haunted her, replaying through sleepless nights. The job offer in Boston loomed like a shadow, threatening to take him away again, just as she was starting to believe in second chances. She'd avoided him since, dodging his calls and burying herself in paperwork, but the locket in her pocket and the note, "Don't hate me," were constant reminders of what she stood to lose. The porch creaked behind her, and she turned to see Noah, his flannel jacket open despite the cold, his hazel eyes searching hers. Snowflakes caught in his hair, and the sight of him, steady, familiar, and achingly close, made her chest tighten. "Morning," he said, his voice low, like he was testing the waters. "You've been hard to find." Clara wrapped her arms around herself, the cold biting through her sweater. "Been busy. The inn doesn't run itself." He stepped closer, the boards groaning under his boots. "Clara, we need to talk. About Boston. About us." The word "us" was a spark, igniting a warmth she'd tried to smother. She wanted to run, to hide behind her walls, but the sincerity in his gaze held her in place. "What's there to say?" she asked, her voice softer than she meant. "You're leaving. Again." Noah's jaw tightened and he shook his head. "I haven't decided. I meant what I said at the festival. If you want me to stay, I will, but I need to know what you're feeling." Her heart pounded, a mix of fear and longing that made her dizzy. She'd spent 12 years protecting herself, building a life where no one could hurt her like he had. But the truth was, she'd never stopped loving him, not through the note, the years, or the pain. And now, standing here, She was terrified of losing him again. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "You broke my heart, Noah. I don't know if I can trust you not to do it again." He closed the distance between them, his hands hovering like he wanted to touch her but wasn't sure he could. "I know I hurt you," he said, his voice raw. "I was a kid, trying to do the right thing for my dad, for you. But I'm not that kid anymore. I love you, Clara. I never stopped. And if you let me, I'll spend every day proving it." The words hit her like a wave, washing away the last of her defenses. Tears stung her eyes and she laughed, a shaky sound that broke the silence. "You're terrible at timing, you know that. Saying this now when I'm a mess." He grinned, the kind of smile that had always undone her. "Maybe, but I'm not letting you slip away again." Clara's breath hitched, and before she could overthink it, she stepped forward, closing the gap. Her hands found his jacket, pulling him close, and his arms wrapped around her, warm and solid. Their lips met, tentative at first, then deepening into a kiss that tasted of snow and promises. It was everything she'd lost and everything she'd found, and for the first time in years, she felt whole. When they pulled apart, breathless, Noah rested his forehead against hers, his hands cupping her face. "So," he said, his voice husky, "is that a yes to staying?" She laughed, swatting his chest. "Yes, you idiot. But you're helping me run this in. No more disappearing." "Deal," he said, kissing her again, softer this time, like a vow. The moment was broken by a familiar cackle. Mrs. Delaney stood at the porch steps, her scarf a violent shade of purple, her eyes twinkling with triumph. "About time, you two. I knew this inn had some magic left." Clara groaned, burying her face in Noah's chest, but his laugh rumbled against her, warm and grounding. "Mrs. D, your timing's worse than mine," he called, but his arms stayed around Clara, holding her close. As Mrs. Delaney bustled off, muttering about wedding bells, Clara looked up at Noah, the snow falling around them like a curtain. The inn stood behind them, weathered but standing, a testament to what they'd fought for. And in that moment, Clara knew she wasn't just saving a building. She was building a future with him. "Welcome home," she whispered, and his smile was all the warmth she'd ever need. The end.